Okay, so for those who don't know, I've been slowly working my way through In Stars and Time lately, and I say slowly because I can only really play the game for so long before the emotional weight of the story starts to exacerbate my depression and I have to put it down for a while to mentally recharge. And I adore this game, truly I do. It's one of the best written games I've ever had the joy of engaging with, and I don't say that lightly. But I hit this one spot in the game that I absolutely just cannot get out of my head, and I figured, hey, I have a YouTube channel, might as well gush about it and pretend I'm doing something productive with my time. So let me tell you about how ISAT has fucking astounding LGBT representation, and how it made me cry like the sensitive little bitch that I am. I actually talked about the game a few times in my channel before, once in my recent Best Games I Played in 2024 video, and 2 more times in 2 different videos on non-binary and asexual representation. I'll link to the videos down below if you haven't seen them. But the thing is, I only kind of brushed over the game in my representation videos because I hadn't actually played the game when I made them. So I was admittedly unaware of just how good the scenes I want to talk about really are. Oh yeah, and this is your token spoiler warning if you're the kind of person who has a conniption about that kind of thing. If you'd rather see these for yourself without my commentary, play up through Act 3 of the game, that's about halfway. So for those who don't know or need a refresher, In Stars and Time is a character-focused RPG about a party of adventurers trying to stop a shithead crybaby from freezing the world in time, and the main narrative and gameplay mechanic is time loops. Sifrin, the POV character, is stuck in a time loop and has to jump forward and backward in the journey to try to find a way to stop the king and escape the loop for good. But I don't want to talk about the mechanics, I want to talk about the queer rep in this game, because it does non-binary, transgender and error ace rep so remarkably well. I'll start with the non-binary rep because it's honestly just got the least to talk about. And that's not the criticism it sounds like, the game actually handles it pretty well, it's just not explored as a character trait in the same way that the transgender and error ace rep is. 2 of the main characters are non-binary, Sifrin and Bonnie. Bonnie uses they/them pronouns and the game actually makes sure to never gender them in any way. Even when they're not referred to by name or nickname, it's always by a neutral title, such as kid or preteen or cook. Sifrin, meanwhile, uses he/they pronouns, and what I really like is that their friends make sure to swap between pronoun sets when referring to him, which shows really good attention to detail. Sifrin even clarifies at one point that they are not a man, which is a brief, if very welcome, acknowledgement of gender identity. Simple, elegant, gets the point across. Also, Sifrin is only the 2nd time I've ever seen a mixed pronoun character in a game, with the first time being Holmes from Boyfriend Dungeon, who uses she/they. Huge props for that there. These are all things that you'll simply notice while playing the game, and they're good, but for the following 2 pieces of representation, we have to get into the secret quests. Well, they're called secret quests, but you literally have to do them to progress the story, so that's not a super accurate name. Whatever, they're really good character interactions, so let's just fucking talk about them. First up, we have Isabo, who is a delightful man I would happily stab any number of people for. And Isabo spends the whole game being a wonderful person, a supportive friend, and an all-around beefcake with a heart of gold. You actually have to do his secret quest last, as he insists that you should help your other friends first. So you do, and they're great, and they all make me tear up like a sappy bitch, and I'm not crying, you're crying. Anyway, the thing about Isabo is that he's a trans man, and you spend the game getting to know him and appreciate him for the strength of his heart, and his general air of lovable kindness, and also his muscles, but there's always this sense that he's kind of holding himself back, pretending to be less than he is. He looks and acts like a himbo, but the man is incredibly knowledgeable on a great number of topics, an aspect he himself always seems to downplay. And you actually learn why. Isabo was a very bookish and very shy little girl once, and he absolutely hated that about himself. And one day he looked in the mirror and asked himself if this was really what he wanted to be, if there was any way he could be the kind of person he could love. And so he decided that he really didn't want to stay as he was. Isabo wanted to change. ISAT takes place on the continent of Vogard, a place where the dominant religion is devoted to change, and the church equivalents in this world are called houses of change, where people go to, well, change. It's where people go to learn new skills, to train their abilities, and to perform bodycraft on themselves, which allows you to transform your body to better fit your image of yourself. People are allowed to simply go to the House of Change, stay there for a while, and then come back as a whole new person, and people will just accept this new version of you, no questions asked. So Isabo went to the House of Change, trained his body and his voice, performed bodycraft, and became the man he is now. But what's important is that Isabo acknowledges that who he is now is still a work in progress. He feels trapped in the perception other people have of him as an airhead, being viewed as stupid because he acts a certain way to feel better about himself. And then you get to tell him that you like who he is, and that makes him really happy. The thing I absolutely adore about this is that it shows very clear attention to detail, both from a world-building perspective as well as a real-life one. The writers clearly thought long and hard about what being trans would look like in this world that has something like bodycraft, where people can magically alter their bodies to fit their self-perception, as well as how it would play into the dominant religion. But it also speaks to a truth about real-life trans people, and that is that they can often feel trapped by people's expectations of their new gender. Transitioning IRL is a long and arduous process that takes a lot of time and effort and money, and a large part of that is social transitioning, on teaching other people to refer to you in a new way, to look past what they might see and acknowledge the you that you know you are. But a lot of people can get very caught up on appearances and use them as an excuse to question or outright ignore a pre-op trans person's gender identity. And even after fully transitioning, there can be this fear that indulging in things more stereotypically aligned with your gender assigned at birth can invalidate your entire identity. Trans women can end up feeling like they have to keep their hair long, they have to wear dresses and makeup no matter what, and trans men can end up feeling like they're not allowed to paint their nails or engage in quote-unquote girly hobbies, because that's not what men do. And so sometimes trans people can become trapped in the gender expectations others have, which really doesn't make them happy. And it's clear that this is something Isabo has endured, feeling he has to be a certain way for people to accept and like him. It's a moment of very real emotional rawness that really hit home for me, and it made me so happy to be able to tell him that he was perfect as he was, and that simply knowing him as he is makes you happy. I think a lot more trans people could stand to be told that. The world would be a much brighter place if more people were given the Isabo treatment and told that they were a joyous addition to our lives, don't you think? Finally, I want to talk about Mirabel's secret quest. What about Odile and Bonnie, Writin? Well, they're fantastic too, but neither really has any LGBT rep involved. Also, I don't want to spoil all of them, so go play the game if you really want to know what happens. Anyway, Mirabel's secret quest involves dating. See, Mirabel is a housemaiden to the House of Change, and she's a very devout believer in the faith. Probably the single most devout person you'll meet in the game. And the thing about the Change religion is that it values change over all else, hence the name. Growth, learning, transformation, trying new things, they're all important factors of her faith, the core tenet of which is that you should always be changing. And Mira has always been an ardent practitioner of these beliefs, but she has also never dated anyone. And so before the events of the story were put in motion, she asked a matchmaking company to give her a list of potential romantic partners to choose from, because, in her own words, romantic love is one of the biggest ways to change, which is very true. The transformative power of love is a very old staple of storytelling. But the thing is, Mirabel really doesn't want to do it. She finds the thought of being in a romantic or sexual relationship uncomfortable, to the point that she actively hates thinking about it. But she feels like she has to in order to be a good housemaiden. To be true to her faith, she believes she has to change who she is. In case you haven't caught on yet, Mirabel is aromantic and asexual. She's an incredibly loving person, arguably one of the kindest in a story full of very kind people, but she cannot love someone in a romantic or sexual way. I should clarify that I use the word cannot here because Mirabel also uses the word can't in regards to romantic and sexual relationships. I know that not all error ace people use can't to describe their sexuality, but she does, so that's the word I'm using for her. And she sees this as a failing, both in terms of faith and morality. She's dealing with a very real guilt surrounding her identity, and it's honestly kind of heartbreaking. I think it speaks to the reality that a lot of asexual and aromantic people end up feeling guilty about their identities, not for their lack of sexual or romantic attraction, but for not being able to meet the expectations of other people, of their families, their partners, or society in general. In my video on asexual representation, I had a short discussion on amatonormativity, which, in brief, is the general social attitude that romantic and sexual relationships are inherently more important than familial relationships or friendships. And it's an incredibly pervasive thing that most people aren't even aware of, and one of the unfortunate effects of it are that people tend to view our ace folks as fundamentally incomplete. And this unfortunately can weigh heavily on the minds of aspec people, which it clearly does for Mirabel. She even says that she feels like a mistake, that she must be broken for not being able to want to do the romantic and sexual things that other people want to do. And like I said, this is utterly heartbreaking to know that someone as sweet as Mirabel is suffering so much over this. But this is where the writing truly shines, and it's what's been consuming my thoughts for the past week, because you're able to help her feel better about herself. Siffrin, though not aromantic, is asexual, and he uses that to connect to and comfort Mirabel. They bond over how weird and gross they think sexual matters are, and even though Mira is at first still caught up on her perceived deficiencies, Siffrin is able to change her mind. They help convince her that it's the system that needs to change, not her. That she can change people's minds instead and still be her and still be happy. There's nothing wrong with her at all, she's perfect as she is. This is amazing writing, I love it so much, because it really does speak to the fact that there is absolutely nothing wrong with aspec people. They're just different. Society is what needs to change, not the other way around. What I also really like is the little character details between Siffrin and Mirabel. For instance, Mirabel loves romance stories and talking about love, but she really doesn't like the idea of it being applied to her, which I think speaks to the truth that a lot of aspec people enjoy romance and even sexual content in creative works. They just don't want anything to do with it on a personal level. There's even a cool detail introduced in how all the characters from Vogard have their ears pierced, which is noted could be a sort of cultural priming for the exchanging of bonding earrings, which is a very common romantic practice in Vogard. And it's not even one of the 3 Vogardians that notice this, but they all freak out at the thought that they've been conditioned to prepare themselves for that kind of exchange all their lives and never realised it. Mirabel is actually really upset by this, and the only reason she doesn't throw her earrings away in disgust is because they are expensive and she likes them. I'm sure you can draw your own parallels to our world. Another cool detail is that Siffrin is actually somewhat touch-averse, and their friends actively work to avoid touching them and making them uncomfortable. But Mirabel doesn't share this hang-up, and I really like that this detail is here because it could have easily been mistakenly coded as an asexual thing, but they avoid that by having 2 asexual characters, which is something you almost never see in any media. There are other things I could go over, but I honestly think you should just play the game. I just get really happy when I see good representation, and I needed to share my thoughts with people. In Stars and Time just handles these character aspects so well, and I'm really glad it does. This game is great, you should play it. Also, I need to give a huge thanks to my friends Lena Bookworm and K Space Prince Art for talking with me and helping me to better understand the asexual and aromantic experience. I wouldn't be anywhere near as comfortable as I am talking about these kinds of topics if I didn't have them to help me understand it better. Anyway, thanks for watching. Bye.